saw a great big tourist bus of folks from out of town. For 40 days and 40 nights, they covered miles of ground. They had a map and compass, but they still were not arriving. Oh, they couldn't get to Pleasantville, so they kept on driving.
Thank you all for joining us today at this important press conference about why nuclear energy is not a solution, nor any part of a solution to climate change. Today, you'll hear from experts who have published recent studies on the economics, cancer rates, and risks of the nuclear industry. These studies make it absolutely clear that the New York Public Service Commission's $7.6 billion nuclear subsidy is bad for New York and slows New York's transition to a clean, green energy future. Our first speaker is going to be Alec Baldwin, who really needs no introduction. Alec's been, as you well know, is an actor, but also an activist who's very knowledgeable and well versed in the issues regarding the nuclear industry. For many years, he's been very, very involved in this matter. So, Alec?
Thank you. I just want to begin by reading something. In the little thumbnail bios they had for all of our guests, Joe saw fit to write, Alec has been an anti-nuclear activist for well over 20 years. He is well informed and very knowledgeable. I'm the only one on the list who he had to write that. He is well, and he had to kind of bail me out. Everyone else's scientific credentials speak for themselves except me. I want to move forward and have our speakers do most of the talking, nearly all of the talking, but I want to say that I'm so excited to be here today, because in the way that we try to craft together panels of people and discussions with people who are experts in this field, we couldn't have hit the jackpot more than we did today. We have 3 speakers today who really, really know these issues and know them on the widest breadth in terms of the efficiency or lack thereof of nuclear energy in the world today, and how it interrelates with climate change and so forth. But, you know, for me, there's always been, like a lot of people, something more spiritual. There's been something more innate that has plagued people about this issue. They know in their heart that they don't trust nuclear power. They know in their gut, and they're not scientists, but you don't need to be. The scientists are here to give us the facts, but most people realize that nuclear power has so many daunting issues that have never been addressed in terms of beyond waste storage and beyond the terrorist threat now, not only for the reactors themselves, but for the storage facilities themselves. People in their gut now know that this is too expensive and not what our future should be. And throughout the 20 plus years that we've been involved with fighting the relicensing of places like Oyster Creek, we were involved in Millstone and now Indian Point. There's a gut sense we have that this is wrong, and today we're going to back that up with a lot of facts. And again, I don't think we could be better off than we are now. Did you want me to introduce everybody? You want to do that? Who's our first speaker? Our first speaker is Joe. Okay. Now Joe, who I've worked with for many, many years, who runs the Radiation and Public Health Project, he's the executive director. Joe's recent epidemiological study, Rising Cancer Incidence Near New York State Nuclear Power Plants Since Startup of Reactors, provides hard evidence that nuclear reactors are not zero emissions sources of electricity, and in fact continuously release dangerous radioactive emissions as well as greenhouse emissions. And I wanted to mention that that Joe is my main source for the information. The cancer rates are exaggerated in and around reactors. In and around, and I'll let him do the talking, in and around places like Indian Point, the cancer rates are unusually high. You know, I think most people who are not like everyone else in this room, most people in this country have busy lives, they go to work, they spend time with their loved ones, they're raising their families, they're busy with their jobs, they want to enjoy life, and they don't have the bandwidth, I don't mean intellectually, but in terms of their time of day, to absorb this issue to the degree that we are absorbing this issue, especially over the people who are the experts here. Forget about that. I'm just saying that, you know, lay people don't have the bandwidth, so they trust as most Americans do, that the country's not going to put them in jeopardy in some catastrophic sense. They trust that. They have a contract with people like Cuomo, and they believe they're going to do the right thing. And of course, Cuomo is a politician who in the current campaign finance system, and I've said for decades how the campaign finance reform is the linchpin of all of our problems in this country, because it'll free elected officials to do their jobs. But instead, Cuomo is beholden to this industry. There's a lot of money in this industry, and he's beholden to people with money to maintain his power. And the other thing is I want to go back to, and the last thing I'll say is about this NIMBY issue. Let me tell you something in terms of the D&D of a plant, which would be, once they shut down, you're going to do the decommissioning and decontamination of that plant, which someone said, maybe it was Dr. Jacobson, is going to take 70 years. And what happens is, in the NIMBY sense, the whole country becomes the neighborhood that you don't want it in your backyard. The whole country becomes the place where, what do we get? We're down to what, 99 reactors now that are working? 98 from a high of about 105 or 104. So if 98 reactors that eventually are going to have to be dealt with, not just the waste. And that's going to be one hell of a NIMBY issue for people in this country. What are we going to do with all that waste and all that radioactive material? Not just the rods, but the buildings themselves, the complexes themselves have to be dealt with. And that's going to be trillions and trillions of dollars to a country that's already trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. The energy industry offers no answers to that problem. All they're saying is, we got the answer that's the most important answer you really need, which is when you flick the switch, you want the lights to come out, and we know that's what you're relying on. When you flick the switch, you want the power to come on, and you don't want to ask any question. You don't care where the power comes from. And what we're beginning to say to people is, we really, really do care about where the power comes from now. The debunking of renewables is one of the greatest crimes in American history. We need to start to tell people that if we build wind, if we build solar, if you have geothermal, whatever the mix and match is, there's obvious places you're going to put. Someone was telling me that if you put wind turbines on derricks in the Great Lakes, in certain parts of the Great Lakes, especially in the western side of the Great Lakes, you're going to have enough wind power from there to power like a third of the country for that 3 months. That's how much wind is on the Great Lakes in the wintertime. So we do a mix and match all over the country. And what will happen is, if we knock down dependence on fossil fuels by 50%. Isn't that something to dream about? Isn't that something to aim for? Not to eliminate fossil fuels, but to decrease our reliance on it. And nuclear's got to go. Nuclear's in a separate category. And we must never, ever, ever stop distinguishing nuclear as being in a separate category. What nuclear achieves, the problems that nuclear creates. These people at Fukushima sat there and they said that the odds of this thing happening were like the odds of you getting hit by a plane while you were sleeping in your bedroom. A plane's going to crash on your house and kill you in your bed. It's so anomalous. It's just not going to happen what happened at Fukushima. And look what happened. One of the worst catastrophes in world history in terms of this kind of thing. And we have to sit there and say to ourselves, enough. They don't get to decide. We get to decide. And those people who are in political leadership in our state and in our country who don't get it, they got to go. This is a potentially catastrophic issue for us as it relates to climate change, and we must switch to renewable power. I don't want to say Manhattan Project, because that bespeaks something military. It's more of an Apollo project. We have to spend whatever it takes. We have to spend whatever it takes to get us to where we're 50% reduction of fossil fuel usage through renewables in the next 20 years.
Gotcha. And now Alec is going to say a few more words, and then we'll take questions.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody who participated today. And I want to say, what a great distillation of the update of where we are with this issue. Every time that this group of people, some have been with us before under the RPHP banner, some are new to joining us, but every time we get together, there's another perspective. There's another iteration of where we're at and why we need to have change. There's better thinking. I was so glad to hear Mark Jacobson just talk about the contaminating process of refining nuclear fuel. When I first started working in this issue, someone said that to me. They said, nuclear fuel rods don't come off the nuclear fuel rod tree. The mining and the processing of uranium for fuel in a nuclear reactor is a very fouling process. a very carbon-intense process. I remember years ago they would talk to us about people working down in Piketon, Ohio at the gaseous diffusion plant, men who were laying in bed dying of cancer, who Clinton and Secretary of Energy Richardson zipped in there and made deals to pay them off. The guy's lying in bed. Someone painted this very dramatic picture. His kids are in the driveway playing basketball. He's going to be dead in 6 months. So he took the buyout. He took the buyout from the Department of Energy. The processing of this fuel in these processing plants is a very, very fouling process. Number two, and these are a bit random, these thoughts, but number two, you'd have thought that in order to engender the support of the public, they've already got the politicians in their pocket, some of them. But you would have thought that in terms of public relations, to engender the support of the public, that the nuclear energy business would have come up with some solutions to these problems. They would have found a way. They got a bunch of scientists working for them. Somebody would have stepped up and said, we've got it. We've got the spent fuel storage problem solved. They've offered solutions to none of the problems they've created. They've created this bundle of problems, and they've solved none. They've solved none. Thank God for the people that we bring together, and thank you, Joe, for assembling these people, because you're never going to get the facts about this in the New York Times. The New York Times is not a good source of news about this because there are people on the board of directors of the New York Times who represent the financial institutions that underwrite these projects. The New York Times will be very good on issues that don't cost them any money. The New York Times will report ad nauseum about campaign finance reform because people running for office don't advertise in the New York Times. So you're going to hear ad nauseum the problems with the campaign finance laws in this country, but when it comes to what's going on up in Indian Point, they're a little mute on that topic. They've not been great on that topic. So articles like the one in Cranes and forums like this are highly, highly valuable. Each of our speakers touched on something when Gregory Yasko talks, and you think about how many other places are poised to have a Fukushima type of catastrophe that are near, what was the plant along the banks, is it the Mississippi where the thing in the Midwest flooded? Calhoun. How many Calhouns are out there where there's that potential? Reading, I'm always curious as to who are the parties that are debunking renewables. You're always hearing people go, well, renewables. It's like we're all sitting around smoking pot in our Birkenstocks making energy policy in this country, and they're debunking renewals, yet other parts of the world don't seem to have that problem. What other countries are leapfrogging the United States in terms of energy efficiency, renewable energy? Other countries are putting the pieces together a lot faster than we are. And one of the real speed bumps into our progress is this undue influence of the nuclear power industry in this country. I mean, Cuomo, bravo on marriage equality, bravo on a plastics ban, but boo, thumbs down on his energy policy. And as people have mentioned, all that money that could have gone to all these other projects in terms of renewables being spent on the subsidies of relicensing these plants. Listening to Mark Cooper, and thank you to Dr. Cooper, who says that these subsidies derail us, they impede us from moving forward toward, and the self-fulfilling mechanism there for the industry to turn around and sit there and say 10 years from now, you're going to need to relicense us again and give us another subsidy because you don't have anything to take our place. Everyone used to say to us when we would go down to Oyster Creek, if you're going to turn the lights off for these nuclear power plants, we're going to lose 25% of the energy supply in this country if you turn these nukes off or in that certain region. Always the same thing. Continue to not develop renewables, and therefore we're forced to rely on these people in this age of global warming. And of course, Dr. Jacobson mentioning that where could that money be spent? Billions of dollars. Think of all the money spent on Fukushima, as he mentioned. Hundreds of billions of dollars that went to remediate this problem. Where could that money go? At a time when the United States of America is broke. We have more debt now than we've ever had in our history. Trillions of dollars of debt in this country. Trillions. And no one wants to talk about that. And then what we spend our money on, when and how, and our priorities must change. And one thing we must do is we need to present, not to scare people about nuclear power, because I don't think that's going to work, but to start to sell renewables in the way that they deserve. I'm from Long Island. I grew up in the heart of Nassau County, South Shore, Long Island, and they were going to build a windmill array off the South Shore of Long Island, right near where I grew up. And everybody said, oh no, it was a very NIMBY issue, which, as it often is. And there was a very NIMBY issue saying, don't build those wind turbines. And I thought to myself, because they said it was an eyesore, and I thought, for me, and I don't want to get too dramatic about it, I said, these things were like the Statue of Liberty to me, wind turbines. A symbol of freedom from contamination and from spoiling effects of fossil fuels. Is anybody saying in terms of energy policy that we're going to be getting rid of oil in the next 50 years? That's not possible. But to reduce oil, we're going to get rid of natural gas? No, we're not going to get rid of it. To reduce natural gas. Someone explained to me that they've yet to develop a whole system of emergency vehicles. Ambulances and fire engines and police cars aren't going to run on grease from a restaurant. Jet planes, so forth. There will be a demand for conventional fossil fuels, but to lessen that demand in the domestic area is the way to go. I'm going to finish by saying that I've been with this group for a long, long time. We go down to Oyster Creek, and this one guy said to us, because these plants are always very cynically sited in areas that depend on good-paying jobs. When we went to Oyster Creek, it was like a scene out of Steinbeck. The guy's sitting there with his wife and his 2 kids. He says, "You're not here to close the plant, are you?" He said with a very tight jaw. I said, no, we're here we don't have the authority to close the plant. We're here to present you with the facts. Then you decide if you want the plant to stay open. People talk about, Joe Mangano has talked about cancer rates and diseases and so forth, soft tissue anomalies all around, autism clusters down in Oyster Creek. These places are often cited where there's a cross-contamination with other contamination. Union Carbide down there, Ciba-Geigy, years of pumping crap into the ground that they got sued for. And people always say to us, you're going to kill the nuclear power industry? No, we're not there to kill the nuclear power industry. It's like coal. We're here to replace it with the thing that all of us need for the greater good. And you want to retrain these people? Great. But the nuclear power industry offers no solutions. They have held us hostage for so many years. And I come back to the same tired phrase, and it's necessary to say it again and again and again. Too cheap to meter, they said when they first announced this technology. Too cheap to meter when they were going to transfer the military application into the civilian power industry. It's going to be the greatest thing that ever happened to you, and it's been a disaster, especially financially. This stuff costs too much money, and it's got to die. It must die. Nuclear power must die and be replaced with the next generation of power, as Dr. Cooper said. And the longer we delay that, the worse the consequences are going to be for us.
I saw a great big tourist bus of folks from out of town. For 40 days and 40 nights, they covered miles of ground. They had a map and compass, but they still were not arriving. Oh, they couldn't get to Pleasantville, so they kept on driving. And then one day the sirens blew, the county was aghast. It seems the aging nuke plant had an accident at last. The stockholders who fainted couldn't be reached for reviving. And they couldn't get to Pleasantville because there was no driving. The highways turned to parking lots from Albany to